Hi folks. In this video, I'm going to run through chapter 11 in your textbook. It's about entrepreneurship, which is not completely inappropriate for a text in international business management, but it is a little unusual. And if you've already read the chapter, or when you do, I think that those of you who've already had a pretty good curriculum in business will recognize that this chapter could appear in a number of courses and is certainly not unique to international business. So a course in entrepreneurship or a chapter in entrepreneurship might appear in a course on strategic management, for instance. And for that matter, a couple other disciplines might come to mind. So this is a little unusual. There is one portion of the chapter that talks about businesses that are started up globally, startups. And certainly global startups are a relatively new phenomenon. They certainly are germane to international business. And in that respect, the chapter is relevant, but not wholly. And so if it's possible, I'll skip by a few things simply because I doubt that that those things are going to be real important to a course on international business. But nevertheless, you should know that it's fortunate for those of you who are general business majors that this chapter is here simply because entrepreneurship and a different concept that we'll run across at the very end of the chapter called intrapreneurship, that is starting new businesses in corporations that already exist. These are very timely, and a lot more of it is going on today than in the past. So with that, let me just get started here. Takes a minute. And there it is, I hope. Yep. And I'm going to get by some of these introductory slides right now. I thought that, and some of these slides are ridiculously simplistic. This happens to be one of them. Entrepreneurship tells you what it is and says an entrepreneur is a person who engages in entrepreneurship. Well, that's helpful. Anyway, here we are. If I can just get this doggone thing to advance. There we go. So early on in the chapter, the authors try to distinguish between truths about entrepreneurs, which really means they're willing to, which includes the fact that they're willing to make a large commitment and just don't settle for the status quo, but quite simply willing to make an extraordinary effort for an extraordinary result. Truths versus myths. And so the chapter talks about some things that people often think about entrepreneurs, but may not necessarily be true. And then again, sort of a you know, for a course in international business, should you become an entrepreneur, good material to think about. And I know that many of you either are engaged or would like to be engaged in your own business. And to the extent that that's true, this chapter may be very interesting to you, but as an element of a course in international business management, it's a bit of a stretch. The point is made in the text that times are getting tougher in conventional business, that security is less, that firms get acquired or merged, in which case some folks will have to leave the enterprise, or in other cases, such as the time we're in now, when we're going through a major economic upheaval, folks will just lose their jobs. And so one of the options, of course, is to strike out on your own. And in these times, entrepreneurship, starting a new business, may seem more appealing than in the past. So then we get into some of this stuff. What do entrepreneurs do? The point that the authors want to make here is that it's possible to build a new enterprise that isn't necessarily intended to generate large profits, but rather to engaged in nonprofit or social enterprises for the social welfare purposes. The concept goes on then that that new ventures, whether they're profit seeking or not, can be at local, national, or international levels. It's more a matter of where the opportunity lies and the amount of capital available. So the process that the textbook describes for you is entails 3 steps: to identify opportunity, to plan the venture, and then obtain the resources that are necessary to get started. And this is a diagram that the authors offer that simply summarizes those 3 steps. This diagram, on the other hand, pardon me, I still have a little bit of the flu. The diagram that I just showed a moment ago discusses the first circle, identity of opportunities, or identify opportunities. So when we're talking about opportunity identification, if you would, start here at eliminate. So what factors in the industry could a business do without? What factors could be reduced and lots of cost taken out of the business model? What factors could be added that would add value to the business model, the typical business model of the industry? And what factors could be strengthened above the norm to take the industry to a new level? The authors acknowledge that these items, eliminate, reduce, create or add, and raise, are actually the elements of the blue ocean strategy, a concept developed by a couple of theorists, Kim and Moburn. It's the blue ocean strategy is more than a strategy. It's a philosophy that supposes that there are facets of an industry, segments of a market that really they exist, but they haven't been discovered yet. Those undiscovered elements represent a whole blue ocean, a whole new area that entrepreneurs can explore. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, you ought to get hold of Kim and Moburn's textbook. It's cited where you find this diagram, and you can read about the blue ocean so-called strategy, but it's really all about moving outside the limits, getting outside the box. Now, what these authors have added is this last box, kept the same. And the customers prefer to move into something that is new or improved, the result of entrepreneurship that is still not too unfamiliar, that they can relate to. The perspectives of the customer are sufficiently unchanged that the customer is able to adapt to the innovation without engaging in or creating for himself or herself too much uncertainty or anxiety. So the closer the product or service is to something the customer is familiar with, even though it's been changed a great deal, will be the product or service is more likely to be accepted and consumed immediately, as opposed to one that lacks that characteristic. And we'll be talking about that problem in just a minute. Okay, so, and in fact, here it is. So the question the authors are asking is, they ask, how do people find opportunities? But, and in the textbook, they give you some examples, but they're really describing the types of opportunity at this point in the chapter. Disruptive technology is a concept that was developed at Harvard. And I'm trying to think of the theorist's name. The poor guy just died. But he did just a great deal to enlighten us about disruptive technology. And I've got a mental block on his name for here. It'll probably come to me. I can see him in my mind's eye right now. But in any event, disruptive technology, as the slide says, will make prior technologies in this particular industry or otherwise obsolete. Low-end disruption, and I'm not going to look at the language here. I'm going to try to explain it in my own words. But very often, the nature of disruption creates a new segment of an industry or a new segment of a market. But in its early stages, it may not be terribly profitable or efficient. It's not, it hasn't become the thing that it'll ultimately be. But there are folks, customers that will want to, early adopters they're called, that want to take advantage of these things. And over time, they'll become modified and enhanced until finally the low-end disruption becomes fully disruptive. but at the low end, the disruption or the innovation doesn't lure customers away from the mainstream of the industry. New market disruption certainly can do that. This is where a brand new market is created, such as when Apple created the iPod. There was no market for the iPod. Apple created it and created a whole new market for mobile music and all the things that went with it, including the iStore and buying music and apps from the cloud. So a whole new market was created by that innovation. And then hybrid is a combination of both new market and low-end disruptions. And although you don't see much print here on the screen, the textbook suggests to you that this is a very common kind of a disruption, a more common kind of disruption. So once the opportunity has been identified, the second step is to create a business plan. For those of you who are with me in Business 410, you don't need me to tell you what goes into a business plan any longer. You already know. But business plans for startups are a little different because it's very often, for instance, to contrast your new product or your new service to one that already exists, because one may not already exist. It may be a completely new product or service. But there simply will be less conventional material, much more about the management team, and particularly the proprietary position, which is why I highlighted it in red. When you get to this part of the chapter, be sure to pay attention. But proprietary positions simply are the competitive advantages that a new business generates for itself. The most obvious example would be a patent, some new product. If you've got a startup drug company and it develops a new patented drug or a new patented medical process that other firms are forbidden to duplicate for 17 years, that's a good proprietary position. Now, another reason why this is important is the reason why business plans in entrepreneurship are important. And you'll just have to trust me, but I've been down this road several times and I've seen it many times. You know, the reason the business plan is prepared is that it serves like the purpose of a prospectus. This business plan is going to be offered to venture capitalists, private equity firms, and so forth, to demonstrate an opportunity to create a new business. And yet financing is going to be required. So maybe I should have highlighted that in red too. And we'll get into that topic in just a minute. Where does this financing come from? Does it come from the entrepreneurs themselves, or will so much capital be required that venture capital or some other source of professional substantial capital can be provided to the business? And there are many firms that provide this kind of capital, but those firms need a basis to judge the potential risk and reward of a new business, of a venture. And the business plan is the basic vehicle for doing so, getting to know the competence and reliability of the management team, the very special nature of the products and services and so forth. All those other things are important as well. But normally, this process of evaluation begins with a business plan. This is a different kind of business plan than the plan for an ongoing enterprise, the strategic plan that we talk about in Business 410 and Management 670, 671. Okay, so where are you going to get this money? One way is to form a group and supply it yourself. A number of possibilities, including the one that gets used the most is credit cards. But as you can see, there are a number of opportunities listed here, and they're commonly used. Another possibility is an angel investor. That is somebody who invests because that investor trusts you and believes in your plan. And then venture capitalists are those professionals that I mentioned earlier. Okay, let's move along. Eventually, you have to take action. You have to implement your plan. And here, the suggestion is made that there is among entrepreneurs a bias to take action. Now, the reason I've been having difficulty talking to you here the past couple of minutes is that I've been interrupted by an interloper. So rather than stop the recording, I'll just show you who this interloper is. He's come in here because he knows he's got me. I can't get up, and so he's going to hold me up for a ransom, and then he'll go. Okay, okay. This is not fair. However, this animal, his name is Waffles, is much more intelligent than I am. Okay, that should do it. Okay, so all gone, no more. There's this funny little, he wants out. Please pardon me just a minute. Okay. Okay, I'm back with you. So it's often been discussed in management circles that there's a certain type of person that is more likely to succeed at entrepreneurship than others. And it's the person that has the bias for action, the willingness to make decisions even without perfect information. And I forgot to put this back, didn't I? And to take action even when others might not be ready to do so. Okay, international entrepreneurship quite naturally is a little more difficult than entrepreneurship domestically, simply because there are more variables involved. And because different countries have different cultures that have different attitudes about entrepreneurship itself and the folks who form new businesses and change things, as well as tastes. You might have a good idea in one country that would be a flop in another country. Another variable, of course, is simply the country stage of economic development. Countries that are in the developmental or early developmental stage will respond to an introduction or innovation of one type, whereas the countries that are more developed may respond more favorably to more sophisticated concepts. So it simply is a fact that when you're talking about engaging in new businesses that may attempt to tap markets in multiple countries, takes a lot more analysis. Okay, these are two sources of information about entrepreneurship and competitiveness in different countries. And when you get to this stage of the textbook, you will see websites that you can go to get these reports. And it might be a good idea for you to just click on them. I think you'll find the both of them to be interesting. Okay, so whoops. The Global Competitive Index it ranks nations according to their competitiveness and does so on the basis of 12 variables. Here are the first 6, and here are the second 6. Didn't want to miss that. Okay, so what is it that differs between countries then that makes their receptiveness to different types of entrepreneurship or different types of innovation more or less? And in your textbook, you get some the names of specific countries. Factor-driven economies are the ones that are focused mainly on, I guess, natural resources, basic materials, unskilled labor. This could have been China 30 years ago. It's not today by far. But many countries in Africa, one of the countries I noticed that was mentioned in the textbook is Colombia. So I think, and I've been to Colombia, I should think that coffee might be something that the authors were thinking of there. Efficiency-driven economies are a little further up the scale. They've moved past the commodity natural resource focus and now are more interested in product quality and efficiencies. The authors suggest that this is where China is today. China clearly is trying to move through that stage to the next one where the United States is located, which consists of companies that are driven by innovation. And so we think of regions such as Silicon Valley, where lots of electronic innovations occur. And of course, the kinds of entrepreneurship that we often think about today are in that category. But in fact, innovations and entrepreneurship is occurring in different parts of the world in all 3 of these categories. Okay, this is kind of funny. Whoops. That's assuming I can control this cursor. Let's see. I wonder if I can highlight that in yellow. I don't think so. Yeah, that didn't do it. So now I made a mess of it. But the shaded area here is identical to the one down here. So whoever prepared this slide really wasn't having a good day. But a born global firm is a global startup. And this simply means that the entrepreneur, the folks who are starting the new firm, have come up with an idea for a product or service that either can be offered globally around the world or must be because it deals with international transactions and attempts to enhance them. So a global startup is the same thing. It's a firm that starts from the very beginning as an international firm, whereas many international entrepreneurs begin with a firm at home and then decide to expand it to global markets, and in so doing, engage in entrepreneurship. Okay, so whoever prepared these slides did not do a great job. But if you go to page 382 in your textbook, you will find some lists, a sort of checklist, I guess, that if you are inclined to be an entrepreneur, start a new business, there are checklists. First, to decide if the firm should be a global startup, certain criteria ought to be met. And secondly, what the firm needs to do specifically to become a global startup rather than a local startup. Okay, now we move to a somewhat different topic. And I say somewhat, not sure just how much. Entrepreneurship is a topic that some of you have probably heard of. It is entrepreneurship, but it's entrepreneurship from within a corporation. So in an existing corporation, a person, a manager, or a team may be designated to seek new businesses or to attempt to form a new innovative part of the corporation, perhaps by developing new products or new services or new business models. So it takes place in an existing business. And then here we are with these authors. So, okay, entrepreneurship, entrepreneur, entrepreneurship, entrepreneur. But this is the person who it doesn't just take direct responsibility for either creating new ideas or converting a new idea into a new business or a new product. This person has to be assigned that direct responsibility. And so the question should be, what kind of person is this? And this is a person who has some of those characteristics of being an entrepreneur, such as a risk taker, to be action-oriented, to not sit on their hands very long, imaginative, innovative, and so forth. But, and this is a but that the authors probably didn't get into adequately, the entrepreneur also has to be a diplomat, has to be somebody who can sell his or her ideas to the management structure, the top management structure, even though that idea may be contrary to the existing business and rub other managers the wrong way. And this person may even need to be able to communicate that idea in spite of resistance to the board of directors. So the entrepreneur is an entrepreneur, but it's an entrepreneur with some internal diplomatic skills that are not needed as much by the classic entrepreneur. But to get things done within especially a large corporation, you've got to be able to work your way through that organization structure and the power structure that exists there. These authors didn't get into that. I suspect because they haven't really seen it firsthand. I have, and I can tell you that the diplomatics involved here are critical. Okay, so let's see. We're going to talk about some differences between entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneur may be an inter-organizational revolutionary, but as I just stated, that's partly myth. The entrepreneur also needs to be a facilitator of creativity and somebody who acts like an internal entrepreneur, but just within one organization. Again, I think that the authors really missed a few things here. The entrepreneur enjoys what the entrepreneur doesn't have, and I think we'll see that in another slide. But the entrepreneur has immediate access to resources that the entrepreneur has to go out and find and solicit. So the entrepreneur has more going for him. There are some ways in which that can be a limitation because by not having to go out and search for funding and continue in that role, the entrepreneur may miss access to the advice, knowledge, track record, experience of good advisors, advisory firms that can help entrepreneurs succeed when they would not have otherwise. So the entrepreneur is much more on their own unless they can build a good team of talented people within the enterprise, and yet they're being sort of separated out to do their thing, and their thing is not what the corporation usually does. So the entrepreneur may not know it, but if they're not a good diplomat, they're likely to become isolated, to become a loner. Okay, so the entrepreneurial organization is one that promotes entrepreneurship, and your textbook provides you with this list of tactics that can be used to foster corporate entrepreneurship. I'm not going to linger on all these items because it would take us too long, and you're going to read the textbook anyway. The entrepreneurial organization, I think this is the last slide, by the way. And again, it's sort of one of these silly things. It's the very last page. So I didn't put a page number here. But again, there are two ways in which the entrepreneurial team or enterprise can exist within a corporation. It can coexist with the other business units within the enterprise. That will create conflict between the entrepreneurial unit, which may be offering products that are more attractive or threaten the existing products or services offered by the company. On the other hand, if you can make coexistence work, you may be able to obtain contributions of talent as and when needed. Structural separation is, and again, I'm not 100% sure of this, but in my view, it's more likely to occur if the entrepreneurial venture becomes substantial or has the potential to be substantial, because the thing has to operate like a new business. It has to have its own management, its own team, its own resources, its own standards for success. And it has to be held accountable for its success and measured against those standards. And when the variances occur, the response by management isn't the same response that would occur when budget variances or variances between the objectives and results of a conventional business occur. In that case, you know, we often ask, is management on the ball? You know, has something changed in the market? But we ask questions about the existing business and business conditions. When we see variances in the development and performance of an entrepreneurial enterprise, and things don't go as well as expected, or for that matter, better than expected, we ask ourselves, have we done something here that didn't quite work but could be changed? Can we modify our business model? Is it just a matter of time before the market becomes aware of this new product, and so forth? But the questions that we'll ask when the new business incurs variances between standards for success and actual performance will be different, and the approach to dealing with those differences will be different from the approach we take with an existing enterprise. Okay, so I think that went a little faster than normally when we review chapters. But this, as I say, is a bit of an unusual chapter for a course in international business management. And yet, for some of you who have, you know, fire in the belly and want to move on to your own business, then some of this chapter may be particularly interesting. And if that's the case, I certainly hope it is. So with that, I'm going to try to exit this system now so that you can get back to work. And as you may recall, that always causes me to just have all sorts of trouble. So